maybe even looking at your notes as you do your homework today. We have done a few worksheets. That wouldn't be a bad idea if you've kept those to kind of look back at those. And hopefully your review will give you a good sample of problems tonight. But there's a lot of stuff on this. Chapter 1 is kind of going over all these different things that we learned about. And this will be a lot of material on the test tomorrow. So I want to kind of go through this so you have an idea of making sure you know how to do all this stuff. And then I'm going to give you your review. So the first thing I want to make sure you know how to do is solving an equation with the square root in it. We did that very early on, and most of us knew how to do that. You square both sides, get the square root by itself. So like if I had the square root of x plus 3 equals 4, most of you know you just square both sides, and you get x plus 3 equals 16. Subtract 3, x equals 13. That one's really easy. What I want to caution you about is check your answers. Remember that sometimes with square root equations you get those extraneous solutions, which means you might get an answer or two answers, but one or both of them doesn't work in the problem. And so make sure you check your answers, because if I give you a problem on the test, there could be one that doesn't work. And if you don't check it, you're going to miss a point there. We also talked about what is a function, determining if it's one-to-one. We just did that not that long ago. Is it a function? Remember we have the vertical line test. Because what the vertical line test is testing is that all those x values don't repeat themselves, right? That's what a function is, when x doesn't repeat. One-to-one, that's when a function's inverse is also a function. So a one-to-one function also passes the horizontal line test. Which means drawing horizontal lines, none of the y values repeat themselves. That means that this function is also an inverse. So make sure you're aware of those things. I could ask you to explain something. Explain to me what a function is. Explain to me what one-to-one is. Explain to me what the horizontal line test is. Like, those are all questions that I could ask you to write out what the answer is. Well, it also passes the vertical line test. Like, if you look back in our notes, it's a function that passes both the vertical line test. Like, I should put also here. None of the x's repeat themselves, none of the y's repeat themselves. Yeah, that would be something you have to say there. Domain and range, we've talked about that since about the first section in here, and I hope that it's easier now. But if I ask you to graph something, definitely you're going to have to tell me the domain and range. I could also just give you a function and ask you to tell me the domain and range. There are certain things that you should know about domain and range, like square root functions. The domain is never going to be all real numbers because you can't have a negative under that square root. If you see a fraction with an x in the bottom, you should know that domain is going to be restricted because you can have 0 in the bottom. You should also know that there's a lot of functions that do have a domain of all real numbers, and that's where those 10 functions that we talked about, if you know it's a nice continuous function, like a parabola or a cubic function, that the domain is going to be all real numbers. So domain and range, don't forget that tomorrow as you're doing those problems as well. Even, odd, or neither, that's been a while ago. That was like section 1, 2, I think. You have some problems on your test tomorrow, just like ones that I think were on your homework, maybe on a worksheet, where it says, state whether the function is even, odd, or neither. Remember that even functions are symmetric with the y-axis, so if you have a graph, it's really nice. But most of the time, there's no graph. How do you check if it's even? If you plug in negative x into the problem, you get back the exact same thing, which means a negative does not change the problem. X squared is an example of an even function. When you plug a negative in, you get back the same thing. An odd function is if you get back the exact opposite. So if you plug in negative x, you get back the opposite of your function. So you can factor a negative out of it, and everything else stays the same. A lot of functions are neither even nor odd, which means if you don't get back the exact same thing or the exact opposite, the answer is neither. I'm looking for some work on those, not just random guesses, even odd or neither. Like, I'm looking for this part. And again, that was like 1-3 or something. You might need to go back. What? 1-2, day 2. Very long time ago. Asymptotes, not only are asymptotes important when you're graphing, but also it's important that you can find the asymptotes. We had 2 types. We had vertical asymptotes. Vertical asymptotes are when you just set the denominator equal to 0. Denominator equal to 0, and you solve it. It's always x equals, right? Don't give me a number. Don't tell me the vertical asymptote is 7. You would write it as like x equals some number. And we also have the horizontal asymptotes. And that's where you have those rules, and you might want to go back and look at those rules. It's all about the degree of the numerator over the degree of the denominator. If the numerator is less than the denominator, then your horizontal asymptote is y equals 0. If the numerator is bigger than the denominator, there is no horizontal asymptote. And if the numerator degree is equal to the denominator, you have to take the leading coefficients. And so I'll just put y equals leading coefficients over each other. You just have to know those rules when you're doing those problems. Like I could just say find all asymptotes and ask you to find the vertical and the horizontal asymptotes. Those 10 basic functions, I don't know. Is logistic function going to be on your test tomorrow? No. But you should definitely know what an absolute value graph looks like. You should know the piecewise, that's definitely something on there. The greatest integer, the parabola. What? So just know the basic ideas about them. Know what like if you see an absolute value in an equation, know that's a V-shaped graph. If you see x squared, know that's a parabola. Do you need to memorize everything you wrote on that piece of paper? No, but knowing the basics about them is going to make this test a lot easier. We also did stuff with functions, and I feel like the adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing isn't so bad. Last Monday when I wasn't here and I left a worksheet, I think I've passed that back since then. Most people did fine on this, but just remember that multiplying is not the same as composition, and that's where a lot of people mess up. If it says multiply, it'll probably say find f times g. That just means multiply them together, not do the one inside the other. And so maybe you want to go back and look at that worksheet because I felt like a lot of people did the composition there. Also, I could ask you to tell me the domain when you do these. And remember, if you're dividing, that's when the domain can change because you have to take into consideration you now have an x in your denominator, and what can x be? So again, you might want to go back and look at that worksheet as a good thing to look at. And then right along with that is the function composition, which most people did the function composition right on that worksheet. Like I said, they just messed up the multiplication. That's when it's going to say find f of g of x or g of f of x. Remember, I could also ask you to find a number. Like if I say find f of g of 3, your answer should not have an x in it, right? Like it should be a number answer. That means do g of 3, and whatever you get, plug that into f and give me that number. So again, this is really good to go back and look at that worksheet from last Monday. It's not all. We got another page. There's a lot of stuff in chapter 1. Implicit, if it says solve the implicit equation, you need to know that means get y by itself. Most of those are like square root problems. Like if I said y squared plus x squared equals 16. A lot of people, I don't know if it was on the worksheet or on a homework quiz, but a lot of people like made up their own rules here when they were solving these. Get y by itself. The first thing you should do is you should subtract x squared. So I'm going to say y squared equals 16 minus x squared. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And here's what a lot of people did on the homework quiz. They said y equals, and they separated this. They said 4, and then they gave me like an x with an I or something like that. You cannot break up addition and subtraction in a square root. And so the answer is just plus or minus the square root of 16 minus x squared. The only thing that you can break up is multiplication. Same thing with fractions. You can't break up addition and subtraction in a fraction. You can break up multiplication. So don't go too far on those problems. Parametric equations. This is kind of the stuff that was new for us in this chapter. That was the x, y, and the t, where you have like x equals 2t, y equals t squared plus 1. That was the homework that most people really liked. I could definitely ask you to make the chart, like the XYT chart, ask you to graph it, put those little arrows on it to show which way it's going. Maybe eliminate the parameter, which means get rid of t. Inverses. The big things I'm looking for is that can you show me that two functions are inverses? And remember, to show that two functions are inverses, you need to show that f of g of x is equal to g of f of x, which both just equal x. So if I say show algebraically that these are inverses, I definitely don't want just a yes or no answer. I'm looking for that proof. And when you do that, that's like doing a proof to how you show that they're inverses, because they cancel each other out. And find inverses. I could give you an equation and say find its inverse. And remember, you just switch the x and the y and solve back for y. Probably not just linear. We did some with squares, square roots, quadratics. Oh, that's the same thing. Cubics. Those are my last two things. Transformations. I'm definitely going to give you some problems to graph that if you know the transformations, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Just like last year, if I asked you to graph and you don't know the transformations, you could just make an XY chart, and as long as you do your math correctly, that's going to be okay. But there's going to be some other problems that I'm going to ask you, what is the transformation? Like, what's happening? Or maybe I'll give you a couple graphs, and I'll say, write the equation for the new one. Like, what happened? I moved it over 3, down 4, flipped it over, put a negative in front of it. So you definitely want to make sure you look over those transformations. It's not an option to know how to do those. And then story problems. I'm going to put a couple. There's obviously a lot of stuff on this, so there's not going to be more than 1 or 2 of any of these problems. But that box problem, maybe not a bad thing to look over, because I like that problem, and it's a good little math problem. So questions about that? Remember that all of your homework is due tomorrow. That includes this review assignment. So if you're behind on your homework from your homework sheet, if you need a homework sheet, let me know. Make sure you have it all together. Make sure it's labeled, preferably in order. And then this is your review assignment. I try to go through that review and pick out really good problems. I'm not promising that there's an example of every problem on your test. Like, you need to make sure. That's why I gave you that review. All those things, lots of you just sat there and watched me go through all that and didn't write anything down. That's what you're responsible for. This review does not promise that everything on your test is on these review problems. But what I can promise you is what I just wrote out. That's what's on your test tomorrow. Also, I have a faculty meeting tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So usually the day of the test is the day that I see people, but I have to go to the faculty meeting at 8. But my big campus, I'll definitely check that throughout the night tonight if you have questions that you want to ask then. Also, I've been getting here by about 7:30, maybe 7:35 if I'm running a little late, but I'm usually here by 7:30, and I'll try really hard tomorrow. If you have a lot of questions, you've got to come in before 8 because I have to go to the faculty meeting at 8 o'clock. All right? So you have some time to work. It is pride time day, so we get out of here in about 18 minutes. If you have old homework questions, great time to ask. Otherwise, get started on this and let me know if you have Look over your notes tonight. This is only our second test. It's our first 100-point test. Yes.